My name is Gadd, and I'm here to do a BD tech tip on how to build V-threads. Big principles with V-threads are you put a couple of ice screws in, and then you either put your rope or a piece of cord or a piece of webbing through the holes that are left when you take the ice screws out. And these are awesome. Back in the 80s, we'd put in pieces of this stuff called electrical conduit into screw holes, and it was scary and dangerous. V-threads actually revolutionized descent off most alpine objectives. They're just awesome. They're a great way to get off safely. People often don't trust them at first, but if you've been using V-threads for a while, you really trust them. They're bomb-proof if constructed half decently. You can actually screw it up a fair amount, and they're still pretty strong. So here's what I try and do. Pick a nice plainer piece of ice like that. Looks pretty good. Put my ice screw down, just make sure I'm kind of measuring it. I use a 21 or 23, a nice long screw, just because I'm not usually super accurate. You could probably get away with it with a short screw, but probably isn't that great. A really well-constructed V-thread will hold like upwards of 10 kN. It starts to become more about the strength of the material you put through the thread than the actual thread itself. They're incredibly strong. Here's what I do. First thing is just start it. I start it vertically, and that actually creates a bit of a divot. And then I use that divot. You want to turn it so that it's going to make kind of an equilateral triangle, give or take. It's not critical that it's exact, but roughly an equilateral triangle. People get all worked up about whether you do these horizontally or vertically. The material that you put through the thread is actually more relevant than the orientation of the thread itself. If you're good at doing them vertically, do them vertically. If you like them horizontally, do them horizontally. It really doesn't matter. So you're firing it in. Just a normal ice screw placement. Gotta make noises. And notice it's nice and smooth as I cut. It doesn't just go really fast and then slow. And there's a nice little chunk core, roughly the same pieces of ice coming out of it. There's no holes. If you hit like a layer where it just spins because there's a space in the ice, then that V-thread is junk. Don't use that. Go back to square one. I mean, you might be able to get away with it, but you don't want to get away with things in climbing. You want to do it right. So I fired that in. So there's my hole, roughly equilateral is about there. This is where most people go wrong. They try to start the screw like this, and then it walks over sideways, and now you're really not anywhere near equilateral. It's still going to be super strong, but the better way to do that is start a little divot like that, and then turn your ice screw. And if I just start screwing now, I'll hit it about 50% of the time. But pro level trick, take another ice screw, it doesn't have to be the same length, put it in like that, and then it's a lot easier. You can actually look at it sideways, kind of visualize it in your mind. Yeah, that's pretty much going to be perfect right there. I'm going to probably blow it on camera. I've done a couple hundred of these and haven't blown it lately, but it's inevitable. So now I'm looking in there. I just felt it start spinning. That means it hit the other hole. Keep cranking it right down. You want to over drill it so the debris and stuff has a place to go. If you just take it to where they intersect, then the debris tends to get stuck in there. If you over drill it, the debris goes into the two holes. So I felt that intersect. I'm just going to over crank it a bit. Spin it back out. And I've used aluminum screws for a reason. These have the largest diameter, so they're the easiest to do. No threads, meaning you just use the rope. They're also the easiest to fish material back out because the holes are the biggest. Aluminum screws make the biggest holes, so I like using those. Now I've got it in there. This is the fun part. And all the ice just went flying out of the other hole. And I could use a few different things here. If this is going to be a top roping anchor, then I'd probably put a sling into it because I want a really bomb-proof anchor. And the strength of the material is, after a certain point, what determines how strong the thread is. This sling has got this nifty little sticker on it that'll probably say 24 kN or somewhere around there, 22 kN. So that's about 4,400 pounds, give or take. It's a lot. It's very, very strong. So if I were to use this as a top rope anchor, I'd still want two of them. Get my handy dander threader. Boom. But that thing is truck. It is very, very strong. So maybe we'll throw a locker on there. And yeah, I'm very happy with that. That is a very solid thread. It's very, very strong. Let's say I'm doing a multi-pitch and this is my Rappel anchor. I'm still going to put it in a backup screw. You try to never rely, unless it's like a giant tree, on any one piece of gear for rappelling. Even if it's a really good nut, just put it in another one, because sometimes you're wrong. Am I good to go? Not really. So just rappel off of that. It's not so hot. You need a backup of some kind. This is the backup I use most of the time for rappels. The reason I use a locking carabiner here and not just a normal carabiner. A normal carabiner is probably fine. I'm just a bit paranoid because I've been at this for a long time and seen things go wrong. If that V-thread were to blow, it would get exciting, right? This rope's going to whip around a bit, and if you've got a locker there, it's just a better outcome. Note also that all the weight is on the thread. There's no weight on this. This is just a backup. But I'm still going to test it really aggressively. Oh, I can't pull it out, what do you know? But now I have tested that with probably pretty close to like 3-4 kN. That's a heavy blow. I know that thing is truck. So I know the thread is good. If I were actually rappelling, I'd have a couple of options here that I can do. I can either set it up with just the rope. That's called a no thread, and I'll do that. I can use a piece of cord and a carabiner if I want to rappel and think there might be an issue with the rope pull, but we'll go through that really quickly. You don't actually need to use a sling. You can use just your rope. And this is called a no thread. This is technical term for this is a hooker. Reach in there and pull it out. Times when you don't want to do this is when it's wet, and there's actually a fair amount of water in this one. So what'll happen is if it's really cold, it'll often be wet below the surface, but dry on the surface, and your rope will freeze in while it's sitting there. So you don't want to do this if there's any water kicking around. Like these work great in Colorado where it's not that cold and the ice tends to be pretty dry. In Canada, often I will use a piece of cord of some sort and put it in. But that's your no thread. Happily go rappelling down. You still want to back that up. Bounce test it hard. All good. One key thing to do, if you're going to do a lot of no threads, cut this little piece of plastic off here. That actually gets stuck in the back of the no thread a surprising amount. So most of my ropes that I'm using for ice climbing, I cut these off and then just write the length on there in Sharpie or whatever. Then you get down to the bottom, pull it out. So I put a sling in the first time, just because you can use slings and they're super, super strong. A sling tests at 22 kN for that sling. This cord here probably tests at anywhere from 10 to 12 kN at 7 millimeter. This is kind of the minimum standard I use for threads that I'm going to wrap off of. If you're using 6 mil, your breaking strength starts to get to the point where you could, break it, or if a few people have used it, it gets pretty close. 7 is what you're after. It's not that hard to carry 7 millimeter. It doesn't weigh that much more. It doesn't cost that much more. You're worth it. Don't cheap out and use like 5 millimeter shoelace just because you're like, haha, I'm light. No, don't do that. Use good cord. You're worth it. Okay, so 7 mil cord kind of being the standard. Shove it through. There it is. What kind of knot should you use to finish it with? Well, that's a good question. You got lots of options. You should use the kind of knot that you are really good at tying. That is the main answer there. There's 50 ways to do this, and most of them are just fine. You can use whatever you want to do it, but you cut your cord. My blade's getting a bit dull. It's the end of the season. If you put a little bit of tension on it, this is why you don't use cord when you're tying off boulders and things. It's really easy to cut. In a V-thread, there's nothing to cut it in there. And this is actually my standard setup. It's got a knife tied to it because otherwise you're going to forget it. And it's got your V-threader there. And I've got my Rappel pressic and my rescue pressic on that. The knot that is becoming increasingly common for this is just to use what's called a flat overhand, EDK, Euro death knot. These are totally fine. You just got to make sure that you've got lots of tail on them. And the key thing with any knot and making it strong is to dress it. By that means pull on all 4 strands just so that they're all dressed, and then the knot takes quite a lot of force. One thing to be very careful with V-threads, if you come up to one, it may look something like this. And you know, we've had a bunch of fatalities in the Rockies where people have come down and gone, all right, and clipped into here thinking it's great. You know, the tails have been covered up by ice over here, and then they're hanging there, and they usually hold a fair amount of weight, but bang, you're just on the tails and you go. So make sure with any V-thread that you find out there that you look at it and you can examine the cord all the way through it. If 50 people have rappelled on this, it may be cut like in half or more, and that you're actually on a thread that goes all the way through the ice and not just the tails. I don't like to have tails any longer than this because people can clip into them and start rappelling and then rappel off the tails. That's about the most. For me, this is a really simple knot. I can do it even when I'm really tired and messed up. So I tend to use this knot probably now. I don't know. I can't remember the last time I tied a triple fisherman's or double fisherman's or whatever. I just use this. It's critical that you clip into the rope itself, not into the thread with your backup. If you clip here, you're just relying on the integrity of this cord. And if the thread were to break, you know, maybe I get hit by an avalanche or something and it's massive loads, I'm going the distance. I'm hanging the whole show off this nice piece of 7mm cord. I'm okay with that, but the idea is to have a backup. So you've got to have the backup going onto the rope, whether you're rappelling on rock or ice or whatever you're doing. It should be on the rope like that. That's going to work out really well. And again, all the loads on the thread, none on the backup. Send the first couple people down, they're out of there. And then the person with the largest amount of adipose tissue or muscle or whatever, send the big kid first and have him bounce it again. Test the pull, right? You get down there, does it actually pull well? Maybe you started it as a no thread, but it doesn't pull well, so then you decide to leave a piece of cord. Then send the skinny kid last. That's usually me. So I send them, I usually get to go last. I take out the backup, because right, we've tested it with the big kid, we bounce tested the hell out of it, we know it's good, and I'm totally happy with that. If I were worried, again, maybe I'd put a sling through it, a carabiner. Another thing I could do is put a carabiner on here. It doesn't have to be a locker, but it's just a way you know the rope is going to come down. It really sucks when it's like dark 30, you've been climbing for 10, 12 hours or longer, and your rope is stuck over your head. I'm very happy to leave a piece of cord and a carabiner on it and rappel if I have to. That's totally fine. That's like $15 super well spent. I'll drink a beer less in the bar or whatever that night to pay for it if I need to. That's fine. But that's how to build V-threads. Again, quantity of ice captured in the V. I like to use really long screws for it. And it's just incredibly strong in good ice. Whether you use horizontal V-threads, vertical V-threads, 45-degree V-threads, or whatever, just make sure that they're good and deep, that you bounce test them hard with good backups, and then pull test it. Like get down to the bottom, first person down, pull test it and make sure it slides. And you're good to go. Cool. So nobody ever believes that these things are strong. They're like V-threads and ice, that stuff's sketchy. So I put that in with a 20 plus centimeter screw and it's pretty accurate. I probably got 19 centimeters of material trapped back there, but we're gonna have some fun with this. And we're gonna remove some material. Trying not to hit my cord there as I do this, but inevitably I will. You can see, it's kind of neat to see this too. Like there's the chunk it was running through, and it's so I'm gonna keep chopping at it here quite a lot. So I can see the cord running back there. It's kind of neat. You can actually see the screw marks. So now I've chopped it down to the width of the material is about that. I think that's still strong. We've chipped it out from the surface. We've removed almost half the material of ice material. I'm not even gonna pull on that. I know that's still so ridiculously strong. So I'm gonna keep chipping at it some more. And so I'm keeping blowing it out. Now you can see the cord running back there. It's getting pretty thin, right? You guys think you could rip that out? No, not a hope. So, but just to illustrate this, I've taken out, like that's a shallow That is technically a shitty cord. I still can't blow it. Like, by jerking on it, I'm definitely getting over 2 kN right there. Like, it hurts. My hips will be sore here. And that's that wide in there. It's still holding just fine. So we started out that wide, and now we're down to this wide, and it's still truck. But it's actually, having done this exercise a few times, I know it's quite strong for a while yet. So we'll chip some more out. So check that out. I should be able to blow this, no problem, hey? There's like not much left in there at all. Look at that thing. Some pinche. Sorry, swearing out in Spanish. I can't do that on camera. But it's pretty thin, right? Like, I should be able to blow that, right? I might be able to blow it, but I kind of doubt it. Okay, I don't want to hit it any harder than that. Like, it hurts. But if you look at it, there's about that much ice still in there. Right? There's really not in there very much left in there. And it's still taking like full body slams. So remember, we started out with ice that was out to here, right? And if you just think about, this is still taking the hardest that I can throw at it. I don't recommend, you don't want to go out there and build shallow, lousy V-threads, but this is way smaller than the thread I would make with this. But the point being, it's the material, the actual physical material, that is the limit in good ice. It is so strong. Don't build V-threads with these. Build them with good, proper, long screws. But you get the point. But we'll take this even a bit further here, just for grins. Gonna chip around it some more. This is not great ice, actually. It's pretty. It's really wet. Okay, so now I can actually see. You can actually see the cord behind it. I might be able to pop this one now. All right, now I can actually see the cord. Oh, I got